You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast powered by BBBGive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, this is Bennett Weiner. I'm the new president and CEO of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. And as my inaugural podcast hosting, I'm very pleased to have as a guest the former CEO of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance and the founder of also the Heart of Giving podcast, Art Taylor. And we thought for this first podcast under my leadership that I would interview Art to talk about his times with this organization, where he's going, and to get his thoughts on charities and accountability and other issues that we routinely deal with in carrying out our work and activities. So welcome, Art, as a guest this time for the Heart of Giving podcast.
Yeah, it's always fun when the script is flipped, so to speak. And it's especially delightful, Bennett, as you know, to spend this time with you as we have these last almost 24 years.
That's right. I've been working joined at the hip with you since you came in 2001 when you started with the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. And it's been a long journey, although it went quickly for you. And a lot's happened since then. So, as you look upon the time that you were with the organization, is there one thing that hits you most as being a lesson learned in terms of what challenges the charitable sector faces in terms of accountability issues?
Well, in terms of accountability, I think that one of the biggest challenges is to help people appreciate that most organizations are trying to do the right thing. And we sit at a position at the Wise Giving Alliance where we're both trying to help people demonstrate their desire to help organizations, but also to work with organizations that they can trust. And it's sometimes a tight walk, right? Because we want to make sure that organizations are adhering to the highest ethical standards and accountability standards. But at the same time, we don't want people to be scared off from supporting those organizations, but to exercise the right amount of caution, to make sure that their resources are being put to good use. And it's not always easy to achieve. I think we do a very good job of it, though, because we do try to work with people as they come along, and we give them the right kinds of tips and tools that they can use to make impactful gifts of their time and money. So it's been a really interesting journey, and we've evolved, as you know, Bennett, over these almost 24 years. And we've seen quite a bit happen in the sector over that time that has seen organizations actually lose some of the confidence that people have had in them, not necessarily for their fault, just because we're seeing so much more now because of the way communications go. And when we started this work, Bennett, you'll recall that there may have been only a few TV stations and some radio stations that, we kind of leaned on to get our information. And now, these 24 years later, information is everywhere. And some of it we can rely on, and a lot of it we can't. And so our work has really gone from being a place where people could get good information about charities and how they're being accountable to an organization that's also trying to give people the kind of news and information they need to really understand what's going on in the nonprofit sector, as well as within individual organizations. And that's kind of been a little shift for us too.
Yeah, that's true. And, as I'm thinking over the years, I remember when you started with the organization, it was around June of 2001. Within a few months, you faced one of the biggest challenges, all the fundraising for the September 11th.
Yeah.
And that was something unprecedented that the public faced. And do you recall those times and
Oh my
uh,
goodness.
how it was back then? Because that was something that we haven't faced something like that since, thank goodness. But it was quite an event when it did happen. All the money being raised and questions that were being swirled around who to give to and how much and so forth.
Well, there are a number of stories that come to mind around that time, Bennett, and one of them is linked to a good friend of mine and a former Wise Giving Alliance board member, Al Lenhart, retired general and former ambassador to Tanzania. Al was also the first African American to serve as Sergeant at Arms for the U.S. Senate. Well, when I started this job a few months before 9/11, I remember having lunch with Al. And Al at the time was the vice president, the chief operating officer, really, of the Council on Foundations. And so we're having lunch and we're talking about what he's about to do, which is to take the job. He's going to leave the council and take the job as sergeant at arms. And, sergeant at arms at that time was a fairly ceremonial position, and it was something reserved for someone who had a distinguished career. And in Al's case, as a general in the U.S. Army and now in the philanthropy sector, he was going to basically finish out his career in this really great role to have, right? This role where people are remembered because of what they were able to do in other aspects of their lives. Well, as it turns out, people think about how difficult our job was, but when 9/11 hit, Al's life was impacted too. Our life was impacted because we saw so many donations go to nonprofit organizations almost overnight. The Red Cross, Salvation Army, the United Way, just big three to think, three big ones just to come to mind right off the top of my head.
Right.
But there were many, many more. There was a fund out of New York, the Liberty Fund was created. And so there were so many people giving to organizations, there's so much money out there. And the biggest challenge at the time was to help the public appreciate that these organizations had some role in disaster relief and maybe even a more broad role than they anticipated the money might be used for. And so there was a need on our behalf to help organizations communicate exactly what they were doing with the money. And therein lied some of the challenge. We were trying to help them communicate, and they were saying to us, on the other hand, well, wait a minute, we may need to use this money for other things. And it got to be a bit of a challenge. And I'll remember my mother calling me one weekend saying, son, you're in a newspaper article here in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and they're calling you everything but a child of God because of how you're because of what you're saying to these organizations. And she said, but I'll tell you, you keep doing what you're doing. It's the right thing. And so we persevered. But that was our challenge. Al's challenge was to now secure the buildings on our Capitol. And after he took the job after 9/11, I had another lunch with him over at the Senate dining room. I'll never forget it. Al had a pager. We still had pagers back then. He had a pager, 2 cell phones, and then there were phones going off in the dining room looking for him. And I said, Al, I love you, but you got far more important things to do than have lunch with me right now. We'll catch up later.
Well, I remember during that height, you and I were averaging like 15 to 20 media calls a day from just all over the country. And we've never had that volume of interest from the general press in terms of the number of stories that people were coming out with. But
Yeah.
you just pointed something out that was a very important lesson from 9/11 fundraising, is that there were so many entities that were just being created overnight without any specific plans about what they were going to do with the money.
Yeah.
And that important lesson, you have to think before you leap into the fundraising of an activity, really carries on to this day with other disasters. And that we always urge people to see if there's a clear description of what the plans are, of what the money is going to be used for. And if there are no plans, that can lead to problems later on down the road with people's expectations not being met.
Our work really had a lasting impact, Bennett, on how organizations communicate to their donor and express their donor intent too, so that they're fulfilling the needs of donors, especially during disaster times when people are giving emotionally because they want to see something happen on that can be good for people who are struggling. And organizations are now acting much better. And I think a lot of that has to do with the work that we did back then.
Yeah, I think so too. And but there were valuable lessons learned from that time that are still applicable today. The other thing I'm thinking about over the years is when both of us were engaged at the beginnings of BBB Wise Giving Alliance, the top issue I think on most donors' minds at that juncture was finances. And to some extent today, people are still focused on that. But over the years, that has become not as the only element of donor interest. They've begun to recognize the importance of the integrity of the appeal and the solicitation being accurate, concerns about donor privacy and other issues. But other things have come into play. I would say, and I'd be curious to what your thoughts are. Do you think technology now is really the big issue that's facing the sector? Because back in 2001, that really wasn't the issue that was on most people's mind. But today, I think it is.
I'll say technology and also managing reputation.
Hmm.
Managing reputation is huge because there's so many ways in which an organization can be seen in the public and perceived in the public. So many channels that have to be managed now to make sure that people are seeing the organization for what it is and not for what some people are saying it is or some institutions are saying it is. So organizations, nonprofits in particular, have to spend a lot more time and energy managing their reputation than they ever had before. I think historically, people just generally trusted nonprofits to be organizations out there doing the right thing. But all it takes now is for someone who doesn't even know the facts to put some things out there. And the next thing you know, you got a firestorm. And the organizations having to deal with it and trying to communicate to their stakeholders what's actually going on. But technology, too, Bennett, is a huge one. And the challenge with technology is kind of related to communications, really, because you have to have the best technology to get the best messages out so that people can really understand who you are and what you're doing. Now, there's also technology that can be used for program purposes. Many organizations are finding that there's technology that can help them better deliver on their mission. And I think those are technologies that organizations have to spend significant dollars on. I mean, look at our organization, Bennett. Over
Right.
the time we've been there, I mean, we probably spent negligible amounts on technology when we started to probably close to 35% of our budget now going toward various technological projects. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
No, that's true. And, with technology also comes challenges as well. I mean, yes, technology provides a tool that not only helps us do our work, but also, in most cases, assists the public with greater access to information that they didn't have previously. But at the same time, technology unfortunately also opens the doors to those who are bad actors. And that's one of the disappointing things that I've seen over the years with technology, as these are forces for help, but they could also be forces for hurt.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that everyone has that growing and continuing skepticism, because no one wants to be ripped off or hacked or fooled or have their money wasted going to a questionable cause circumstance. Um, and that goes with the territory of technology as well, and that's a challenge for us too. Do you see that as a growing concern in the future, based on your
Oh, I
experience here?
do. I just think that not only for the donors or people who use the information, and obviously there's considerable risk that they have to pay attention to regarding that, but the organizations too. I mean, the organizations collect and gather information to help achieve their mission and to reach their constituencies. And that information has to be protected, and their systems have to be secured so that they're not being breached by people who shouldn't have access to that information and who can cause chaos inside of an organization once they do. And I would argue that since most organizations are trying to be efficient with their resources and to try to put as much money as possible to the mission for which they were created, that they leave little available for the kind of tools that they need to protect this data and to support the needs of donors to have, for instance, privacy. And we're in a society now, of course, where the dream of privacy is slipping away from us every day.
Yeah.
And we're becoming much more public as we are, public as individuals than we ever thought we would be. And our information is constantly vulnerable. So there's a lot to be concerned about on that front. But who knows whether there will ever be a way to address those concerns. And some of this, it seems that we're just going to have to live with in this new information era.
Yeah, the other thing I'm also thinking about as we're talking about those challenges is that we fulfill a different role than government regulators do. The government regulators, have requirements they can make for charities, especially at the state government level, such as registration and filing a financial form with them. And they can also subpoena organizations that are under question to investigate if there are some causes of concern. As a standards based evaluator, we rely on the cooperation of charities to voluntarily provide us with information on request so we can do the evaluations that we do, because the IRS Form 990 does not provide sufficient detail for us to complete our assessments, which are broad in terms of our standards. But our standards are not requirements legally for organizations to follow, but they're recommendations of good practices that we believe will reflect the good management of an organization. And that's a different role than government has, which is really fighting fraud and abuse. And that's not what our focus solely is, though. We're a little bit broader than that.
And, as we can see, this is an important role, Bennett, because government action or inaction ebbs and flows with whoever is leading our government, right? And the mood of government officials. And so it's really important, I think, that there be independent organizations like the Wise Giving Alliance that understands the charity sector and can produce standards, and we should talk about that some too, and processes to really determine what the public can be comfortable with when it comes to trusting a charity. And without that, then we're sort of beholden to whatever whims come out of government. And we never want to be subject to that, I think, as an independent sector. But I don't know, the standards revision process that we're under right now is really important. When I came in, we were starting a standards revision project then, and it looks like we're going to be using many of those standards this time around, but maybe they'll be a bit more consolidated, sharper, maybe some of them, some new ones that'll focus on some of the newer issues that are coming up. And I think it's really important that the sector get involved when the timing is right to weigh in on what we're producing from a standards point of view.
Yeah, and if I could also identify a color of the organization, I would be shades of gray, because a
Mm,
lot of the issues that we deal with are not black and white, and that require some judgment to make. And one of the things that I think is a little bit different about the way that we've been doing our work, over the years, is we individually communicate with each charity for every report that we produce, and we have back and forth before something is posted and finalized. So it's with the assistance of the organization, but also due process of them seeing what we have in mind in terms of our conclusions. And very often we're able to amend findings because they give us clarifications or additional information that enables us to conclude that they meet standards in many cases. Um, but that due process is really an important part of our work, and that, I think, in some ways makes us a little bit different from how others that report on charities go about their assessments.
yeah, and you're right. Due process is key because it goes to creating credibility in the evaluative process. And that, I believe, is something that we've stood for all these years. And I believe that our nonprofit sector and organizations that you go through our process really appreciate. And I think they also appreciate how it improves their organization. Going through a rigorous evaluation like we have here at the Wise Giving Alliance, actually improves the work of the organization. So that's a great ulterior, I guess, motive and reason for organizations to actually submit to going through such a process.
No, it is, and we especially hear uh, good comments from some of the smaller organizations that we evaluate, who appreciate the tips and advice that we provide them of what changes they can make to come into compliance with our standards. And so by the end of it, they feel that they've been improved and counseled on some good measures that they can take into effect. So that's an important part of the work that we do
Yeah.
in carrying out our reporting. It helps the organization and not just the public that's seeing the report, to help them verify the trustworthiness of the organization.
And Bennett, I also want to just point out the important role that the Better Business Bureau has played in the success we've had organizationally. People still don't know that we're actually a separate organization from the Better Business Bureau. However, the Better Business Bureau did actually found the organization. We were the result of a merger of two organizations. One was the National Charities Information Bureau, which was out of New York, and it had been around since, I believe, the year was 1917 or something like
1918, I believe. Yeah.
1918.
Hmm.
Okay. And then the Better Business Bureau had a service
The
called the
Philanthropic Advisory
Philanthropic
Service.
Advisory
Hmm.
Service. Yeah.
Right.
And it was housed at one point in the BBB Foundation. And,
Right.
and these two organizations, the service actually created an organization called the Wise Giving Alliance, the BBB Wise Giving Alliance, and the National Charities Information Bureau was merged into that, and we had the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. And these organizations were doing very similar work for many, many years, and it made all the sense in the world for us to become one entity. But as you know, Bennett, those early days were not the easiest. We had to develop ways to support the organization financially, and we had to find ways to get more reports done. And over those years, we figured out how to do both of those things. And I'm just happy to hand over to you an organization that you helped build that's in pretty good shape. And as we look to the future, we have a great team. I love the staff that we have, and we have a great board of directors, organizations that respect the work we do. Our website traffic continues to climb. It's really wonderful. We have a lot of innovative projects, including a new AI tool that people can use on give.org that will answer some of their questions about how to give to nonprofit organizations using all of the information that we've trained this AI to use based on content on our website. We have the first ever blockchain-based donation portal where people can go and either give cash or cryptocurrency to their favorite charity and know that their donation is going directly to that charity and not to a third party. We have the donor trust report, which was a really creative tool that one of our executives helped produce, a survey to help people really understand how the public feels about the trustworthiness of the donating public of the nonprofit sector. And these tools have been really helpful in not only helping donors, but expanding our work in a way that elevates the importance to donors and to nonprofit organizations. So I'm really pleased, Bennett, that we've been able to collaborate and get this kind of work done over the years. And as I said, I leave an organization in great hands. I've said this many times. There's no one in the world, you will not find another person in the world who knows more about charity accountability than Bennett Weiner. And we're leaving this organization in your able hands. And I just know that great things will continue to come out of it under your leadership.
Well, thank you, Art, for the kudo. I don't know if I go that far, but I do appreciate your confidence in me. And it's been my honor and pleasure in working with you all these years. And you've accomplished so many things. I think the organization is in excellent shape, but we've achieved quite a lot together. And I thank you for everything you've done. But for our listeners and viewers today, could you let people know about where you're going to be going next and what the next chapter is in
Sure.
your career?
Well, I'm excited to be becoming the new CEO of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP Global, as it's known. It is a global organization that has as its membership people who go out and raise money for nonprofit organizations. And our objectives are to make sure that they do that work with excellent skill and the knowledge to do it at the highest possible level, and also to do it ethically. So you can see that this continuum of ethical conduct is going to carry over from the Wise Giving Alliance now into my new role here at the Association of Fundraising Professionals. And I come to the leadership of this organization at a very interesting time where we're seeing a dramatic decline in the number of people giving to nonprofit organizations. And I've talked about this many times on the podcast, but it's, I believe, almost at a crisis level because we're not only now seeing fewer people give or fewer families give, but we're seeing somewhat of a decline in the total dollars as well. And if you add to that the concerns that nonprofits have about where the government will be in the future supporting organizations, you can clearly see that there's a real challenge now that we face as fundraisers and as organizations that are needing to raise money to do social good. We're obviously going to have to make stronger appeals. We're going to have to be more effective in building relationships with donors. Donors are going to have to trust us more now than ever before. We're going to have to tap into this generational wealth transfer by reaching younger audiences earlier so that when they grow up, they'll understand the importance of giving not only to their neighbors, which is important, but to institutions that carry a mission to make change in the world in a way that they think it should be made. And, you know, the other thing, Bennett, we can't simply rely on the wealthy. While I appreciate how important it is for us to get large gifts, organizations need those large gifts from people who are very wealthy. We really applaud people who give in significant ways that way. But we need the everyday giver too, because they're voting for change with their small dollar donations. And by the way, no gift is too small. Every gift counts, every gift matters. And you actually are creating a degree of independence when you give those small dollar donations, when lots of people make those small dollar donations to their favorite cause. And I worry sometimes that people look at Well, I can only give $10. I can only give $5. I can only give 50 cents. What difference is it going to make? It makes a huge difference because it's aggregated with those gifts of others. And that's what gives these organizations independence. So I hope that when you think, oh, I don't have enough to give, that you do anyway. And I know that there's not everybody's able to give. People are
Right.
dealing with a lot in their lives right now, right? People have all kinds of challenges that they're facing economically. And so they may not be in a position to give. I respect that. But recognize for those of you who do, who can, give something, give clothes, give products, give your time, give whatever you can, because that's what makes our society go in a way that makes it empathetic to the needs of others, makes it caring, and actually makes our capitalist situation here in the United States and the type of government we have work. So I just believe that it's important to everybody to give to the extent that you can.
And I think during these times, there are other challenges with federal cutbacks on grants. I imagine that fundraisers are going to feel even more pressure in many cases to bring in more than they have before,
Yeah,
to make up for those losses at organizations that have received federal funding.
yeah,
And that's quite a challenge for organizations to meet.
it is.
And it will take time for them to be able to recover from that. And some may never recover, depending on the circumstances.
That's true. And we have a big adjustment period that we're going through. One of the things that I think we have to do, Bennett, is help boards understand what fundraisers do. Because I think it's very easy for some to think the way you evaluate it is how much money came in. Well, that's one way of evaluating what fundraisers do. But if you're just looking at that, you're going to miss the process and the practice of fundraising that's really about building relationships and helping people and donors engage in a way with the organization so they're going to be consistent donors to the organization's work. Transactional relationships don't work. We need lasting and deep and meaningful relationships that connect people with causes that really matter to them. And that can't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes many different ways of connecting with people, understanding their aspirations for how they want to see the world and how they want to see their dollars put to use. And it takes quality fundraising to really deliver that. And when you do, it's beautiful because people give more and they give more frequently. But I don't think many boards really understand. And it's reasonable for them to think that and that they need the money today. And so you hire a
Hmm.
fundraiser and you think the money's got to come in today. But it doesn't necessarily work like that. You want consistent fundraising, you're going to have to give higher quality people who know what they're doing, let them do their work and support them.
Yeah. And, Art, in your new role as president and CEO of the AFP organization, I hope that in the near future, we'd invite you back as a guest to let us know and talk about more about the fundraising issues that you see the community facing, because we'd be interested to hear that different perspective. And before we sign off today, I want to thank you for the hosting and again the creation of the Heart of Giving podcast, because it was all your hard work that went into that, and all the individuals and philanthropic leaders that you interviewed on this program. Is there anything that you'd like to share before we close out today in terms of that activity for you, the Heart of
Well,
Giving?
the Heart of Giving podcast was, in my opinion, a blessing for me to do because I got to talk to so many leaders in our sector who are striving every day to make a difference. And you could just see in every guest how they would light up when they had a chance to really talk about the work that they were doing and the difference they were trying to make. Sometimes they were so emotionally drawn to what they're doing that I was actually moved to tears in some of these stories,
Mm.
just the hopefulness that they have about what they're doing and where they're headed. And so I want to thank all of the guests who were willing to come on the show and tell their story in such meaningful and vivid and gut-wrenching ways in some cases. I also just want to thank the Wise Giving Alliance board and the team for having the faith in me to actually launch such a thing and to stand behind us to allow us to go out and do it. And so both of those things have been really meaningful. And the last thing I would say is I've learned so much just by talking to people who are doing things that I'd never heard of. I mean, everything from people who are questioning whether if we had enough, whether we even have enough organizations to take all of the wealth and do something good with it. It's crazy ideas. We talked to an effective altruist who actually at the end of the podcast admitted that, well, maybe it's not always about effective altruism. So we've seen people in some of these shows move their position a little bit. We've even talked to people about multi-generational ways for people to come together to solve problems. That, in fact, our buddy Trent Stamp, who was the founder of Charity Navigator, and we were somewhat rivals when Trent was coming along. He came on the show, and he's been with the Eisner Foundation for now 17 years and talked to us about the work he's doing with cross generations to solve problems. We've talked to people in the arts. We've talked to people who are doing science. We've talked to educators. We've talked to people who are advocates for different things. It's just been a panoply, really, of different guests, different ideas, different mindsets and ideologies. And I've learned a tremendous amount from each one of you. And I know you're going to stay tuned and get further more stories. Some of you will come back on and be interviewed again by Bennett. And we'll have a continuing stream of new guests as well who share what they know with the broader public so that they can go out and make better gifts of their time and money.
Well, thank you, Art, for all of that and all the work that you've done on the Heart of Giving and also the BBB Wise Giving Alliance. All the best to you in your new position. And we look forward to talking to you again on the Heart of Giving in the near future.
Thank you, Bennett. I look forward to it. You're going to do
care.
great.
Thank you. Bye.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.